Now for this section and this project, I created a brand new folder where I ran go mod init so that I got this basic go mod file, and I added an essentially empty main.go file, which just includes this package instruction and an empty main function. And the goal now is to fill this function, this file, and in general, the overall project with some life, and to add some code to this project. Now, when it comes to adding some code, I want to start simple here in this main function. And let's say, for the moment, we're not getting the price data from a file, which we will do later. But for a moment, let's say we just have a slice of prices here. So I'll name it prices. And let's say it is a slice of float 64 values. And it's then in the end the prices in that slice that we in the end want to multiply with various tax rates, which we also could store as a float 64 slice. Now we can also initialize these values by using the notation which you learned earlier in this course. This is how we can create a float 64 slice. And in there, let's say for the prices, we simply have 10, 20, and 30 as values. We could therefore also use an int slice, since these are integer values, but since we'll use them in a calculation with a float number, I will create these numbers as float values here right away. And of course, we can also use that shorter notation here if we want to, with the colon equal sign operator and without the var keyword, to create the prices variable like this. And then we can do the same here for the tax rates. I'll also keep it fairly simple for now. I want to have a tax rate of 0, let's say, so that we basically get the unchanged prices, then maybe 7%, 10%, and let's say 15%. And I'm already writing this like this so that we don't have to divide it by 100 later. So that will be the tax rates later, and that will be the raw prices. And the main goal of this program here is to then go through these prices, and for every price I want to add all these taxes for these different tax rates, and then get a bunch of new prices for every single price. So you could say that as a result, I want to get a map where the key should be one of these tax rates, let's say, so a float 64 value, and where I then want to have a slice as a value for every key, and that should be a slice full of float 64 values, because I want to have a bunch of prices for every tax rate, if we want to store the result like this. And we can create this as an empty map initially, for example with this extra make function that's built into Go that can be used to create an empty map without any initial values, like this. And of course here we now also could use this shortcut again to save some space. And now with that setup, we can add a for loop to go through all the tax rates, and then for every tax rate we got in there, we want to go through all the prices here and calculate new prices based on that tax rate. So with a tax of that rate applied to it. So therefore we can create a for loop where we have an index and a tax rate, let's say, and where we then use this range keyword to go through all the tax rates. That's how you can create such a for loop in Go that will go through all the elements in a slice. So that will go through all these tax rates, and then we want to basically multiply this tax rate with 1 added to it, so 1.15, 1.1, and so on, with these prices. So every price here should be calculated with every tax rate. So 10 should be multiplied with 0.7, 20 should be multiplied with 0.7, and so on. And this, by the way, should be 0.7 because I want to simulate 7% tax rate. But still, every price should be multiplied with every tax rate. So we're going through all the tax rates, but we still need another for loop, a nested for loop, because we also need to go through all prices for every tax rate. So we got the price index here, and then the price by going through all the prices. And now we need to calculate new prices based on that tax rate that we have in the current loop iteration. For that, we can add a helper variable here, a results slice, or a tax included prices slice, that might be a better name, which should contain a bunch of float64 values, and we can create that with the make function as well. So we can create such a float64 slice. Here we just have to add a second argument to make when using it on a slice, because when using it on a slice, unlike when using it for a map, you must define the initial length this slice should have. So how many empty slots should be in there. And here we have 3 prices, so we want to have a length of 3, but instead of hard coding this here, it's better to use the built-in len function and derive this length based on the length of this prices slice. And if we ever add a new price here, that will automatically be reflected down here. That's the advantage of using this approach. Here I will just use 3 prices though. So that will create such a essentially empty slice that has 3 empty slots. And of course we can use the shortcut as before, and then in this inner loop populate this tax included prices slice. And here I first want to access the element that has the price index. Because here we're going through all the prices, so through these 3 items, and for the first iteration, price index here will be 0. And we can safely use price index here to access an item on this newly created slice, because this newly created slice will have the same length as the prices slice. So we can safely use the index of that prices slice to store items in this new tax included prices slice. And the first value I want to store there for the first price index is the price we got in this input prices slice multiplied with 1 plus the tax rate. That will give me the tax included price. By the way, we don't need the index of the outer for loop, and therefore here you can use an underscore, which basically tells Go that you know that you have to accept this return value and that you need to store it somewhere, but that you don't plan on using it. That's when you use such an underscore. And with that, we therefore go through all the tax rates, and therefore now here, after finishing the inner for loop, we can go to our result map and set our first key here. Now the keys here are float64 values, and I mentioned before that here I want to use the tax rates as key, so that for every tax rate we have multiple prices that we calculated. So here it is that tax rate that I'll use as a key here in this result map. And the value will of course be that tax included prices slice. And therefore now, after finishing both for loops, we can use the format package, which you of course have to import to output this map. Here with println, I'll output this result map. And we'll make this program way more complex than that. We'll also make sure that prices are read in from a file instead of being hard-coded in code like this. But in a nutshell, that is what I want to achieve with that program that we'll build throughout this section. So if we now run this application here, you see that I get this map here as a result. I got my tax rates here as keys in that map. Here they are. And then as values, I always have these slices with the values based on these tax rates. And now that we got this basic program here, we'll now refine it, make it a bit more generic, also a bit more complex, simply so that we can practice all these different important concepts about which you learned throughout this course.